Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Several years ago on a hot summer day in South Florida, a little boy decided to go for a swim in the old swimming hole behind his house. In a hurry to dive into the cool water, he ran out the back door, leaving behind his shoes, his socks, and his shirt. He jumped into the water, not realizing that as he swam toward the middle of the lake, an alligator was swimming toward the shore. His mother, who was in the house and looking out the window, saw the two as they got closer and closer together. In utter fear, she ran toward the water, yelling to her son as loudly as she could. Hearing her voice, the little boy became alarmed, made a U-turn, and began swimming to his mother. But unfortunately, it was too late. Just as he reached her, the alligator reached him. And from the dock, the mother grabbed her little boy by the arms, just as the alligator grabbed the boy by the legs. That began an incredible tug of war between the two. Now, the alligator was much stronger than the mother, but the mother was much too passionate to let go. A farmer who happened to be driving by heard the mother's screams and raced from his truck with a shotgun in hand and killed the alligator. Remarkably, after weeks and weeks in the hospital, the little boy survived. His legs were extremely scarred by the vicious attack of the animal. And a newspaper reporter who interviewed the boy after the trauma asked if he would show him his scars. And so the boy lifted his pant legs, but he didn't stop there. He proceeded to show him the marks on his arms as well. "I have great scars on my arms too," the boy said. "I have them because my mom wouldn't let go." Jesus' scars tell the story of a God who loves us beyond comprehension, a God who reached down to rescue his children, a God who is much too passionate to let go, and a God who sympathizes with our suffering. While it may seem unbearable now, there is hope. Jesus promises that. Thanks be to God that our current sadness will be replaced with future glory. Now, I doubt that any of you who are sitting here this morning or who have been with us over the last few days would take issue with anything I've said so far. Most, if not all of us, know these truths. And even though they provide us with some level of comfort, at the end of the day, the truth is we still hurt. We still grieve. We still bawl our eyes out. We still feel empty, and we still don't eat. We're still depressed. The one suffering naturally asks the question, so how do I get up and get by until eternity? How do I get through until Jesus comes back or until I go to be with him? Well, if you don't mind, allow me to make a few suggestions. First of all, I encourage you to confront reality. Now, granted, this is not an easy thing to deal with. Denial is a common phase that many people go through in the grief process, but at some point, the reality must be dealt with that our loved one is not coming back. It may not seem fair. It may be incredibly difficult for you to come to terms with, but if you're ever going to move on, you have to accept this reality. Secondly, I would say face the pain. Grief is hard work. It is demanding. It is demanding of one's time and energy and touches every part of a person's being, socially, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Someone once said that grief is to loss what healing is to surgery. I had a friend in Missouri who could hardly walk because his knees were so bad. He decided to have both knees replaced at the same time, and the surgery itself went fine, but the recovery was very painful, as you can imagine. He endured extensive physical therapy and was able to make a full recovery eventually. But if you had asked him during the recovery phase if he would do it again, he would have said absolutely not. But 6 months later, when the pain was gone and he was getting around better than he ever could before, he was convinced that he had made the right decision. Recovery from loss is similar. There's going to be pain, but we must work through the pain in order to heal properly. Attempting to suppress grief is like trying to put a Band-Aid over cancer. When one refuses to deal with the feelings of anger and guilt and loneliness, it only delays the recovery. It's only when one properly deals with the pain of grief that they can begin the road to recovery. A third suggestion in working through grief is finding a new normal. An elderly woman who loses her husband is forced to deal with life on her own. She may have to take on new roles that were once performed by her husband. An elderly man who loses his wife may have to adjust to cooking his own meals or washing his own clothes. A child who loses their father or mother must adjust to not having that parental influence to turn to. Parents who lose a child must cope with the devastation of a life cut short. Loss brings a change in our environment, and how we adapt makes all the difference. Again, this isn't easy, but it is necessary for recovery to take place. In some cases, the loss can even bring a sense of relief. I know that sounds crazy, but there are times when a family member becomes the caregiver to one who is suffering from a prolonged illness, and the grieving process may have begun when the terminal diagnosis was given or when the loved one started to decline, and it can be very difficult to watch them fade. However, if they are a Christian, their death is almost welcomed to a certain degree because their suffering has ceased. This can be a great relief to the caregiver. Adjusting to life without our loved one is never easy. It takes time, it takes determination, it takes prayer. It may even take the counsel of those who have gone through such an adjustment. And along with adjusting to the loss comes emotional relocation. You will never replace your loss, but it is important to reinvest your emotion into something else. Perhaps a new hobby, volunteering, or even another person. Now, this in no way means that the deceased is forgotten. This is not meant to be disrespectful to the one that we have lost. It simply means that as we deal with our grief, we say goodbye to the previous chapter and hello to a new one. One way counselors advise grievers to do this is through writing a letter to the deceased, especially when the loss was sudden. Many times the grieving family feels as though they didn't have time to say goodbye. Another way of turning the page may be through cleaning out the loved one's possessions, sorting through mementos and cleaning out their drawers, sorting through their clothes, etc. These can be effective ways in dealing with grief and moving down the road to recovery. Dr. Henry Nouwen writes this. He says, "I am a wounded healer, someone who has had to look carefully after my own wounds while at the same time caring enough to try to do something in the name of Christ about the wounds of others." Perhaps you're a wounded healer. Maybe you've experienced all the ins and outs associated with grief, and if so, you're well equipped to help others who may be suffering. You may find that assisting others in dealing with their grief may assist you as well. Your emotional relocation may be investing the time and energy into providing therapy to others who are going through something similar. Some way, someday, somehow, we're all going to die. And whoever is around at that moment will take us to the funeral home where someone will prepare our body for burial. We'll be dressed up and cleaned up and made to look somewhat natural. Then they will take care of us until the funeral day arrives, where someone, maybe me, will say some kind words about you. People will cry and remark about how much they miss you. Songs will be sung, prayers will be said, the box will be closed, and you'll be placed in the ground. And I don't mean to be crude. It's just a simple fact that we're all going to spend some time in a box eventually. Unless, of course, the Lord comes back before we die, right? We're all going to do some box time. At least our body is. Everyone who has ever lived has died eventually. That's the report from the cemetery. But while death and dying seem so permanent, while it seems like the end, it's not. We're not going from the land of the living to the land of the dying. It's just the opposite. Death does not have the last word. Death is not the end of our story. The scars that you bear right now won't be there in eternity. Of course, all this presents even greater grief for some of us, like myself. What about our loved one who wasn't a Christian? What about those of us who mourn with no hope? That's a tough one, right? And I would say this: do your best and forget the rest. All you can do is take care of your soul. That is the only thing you truly have any control over. As hard as it may be, try not to drive yourself crazy worrying about the eternal fate of the one you lost. Focus on living for God now so that you can live with Him for all eternity in the place where He wipes away all tears. I want you to do something for me, if you're able. The next time you go to the grave of your dear loved one, as you're standing there or kneeling there and talking to them, why don't you read this passage out loud? Not so much for them, but for you. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve as do the rest who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord, in the air. And so we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. Be reminded of the fact that we do not grieve as those who have no hope. The emotional scars that you bear right now can actually be scars of hope. A glorious future awaits that in no way can compare with this despair that you're experiencing in the moment. There is beauty from the ashes. So reflect on all this. And then say to your loved one, I miss you, but I'll see you again. I love you all. I hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you